Today, I'm going to show you how to use a rarely talked about built-in feature in Windows as a testing environment so you don't have to risk your current Windows install. And I'm also going to show you a third-party alternative that might actually be better. Stay tuned. So today, we're looking at the Windows Sandbox. It's a stripped-down Windows virtual machine that comes built into Windows 10 and 11 Pro. And above that, works as a testing environment that you can use for, well, whatever reason you might need a testing environment for. You could use it for installing software that might be a little bit shifty, or maybe you just want a copy of Windows that leaves no trace of someone using it. But no matter what your reasoning, this is a great feature that everyone should at least know about. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, I got to pay some bills. So check out today's sponsor. This week's sponsor is me. If you'd like to support this channel, the best way is to pick up a t-shirt at cybercputech.com. All my t-shirts are extremely high quality and durable. These are the same shirts I wear in videos. So if you like the shirt I'm wearing, then head over to cybercputech.com and pick yourself up one today. So the Windows Sandbox is essentially a volatile install of Windows. What that means is that it's an install of Windows 11 that is exactly the same every time it's booted. It doesn't store anything from the last session it was used. So if you use this, no matter what you do inside the environment, as soon as you turn it off, then it goes back to the way it was when it started the next time you open it. None of the programs that you've installed will stay, or the files that you've downloaded will stay. It's a fresh copy of Windows every single time it's started. It does all this through virtualization. It runs as an app on any Windows 10 or 11 desktop that's running Pro Edition or higher. The system requirements for this feature are actually quite modest. You need at least a dual-core 64-bit processor and a minimum of 4 gigabytes of RAM. You also need at least 1 gigabyte of free storage space to store the virtual machine itself. However, it's recommended that you have at least a quad-core processor with hyper-threading and 8 gigabytes of RAM. But at this point, that's pretty much what I recommend as a minimum requirement for Windows 11 anyway. Now, like I said before, this feature is only available for Windows Pro Edition or higher. But for people who are running Windows Home Edition, I have a solution for you too. But first, let's jump on the system and play around with Windows Sandbox. Okay, so here we are in Windows 11, and we're going to start out with playing around with Windows Sandbox. So the first thing that you should do is right-click and open up your Task Manager. And from Task Manager, you want to go right here to your Performance tab so you can kind of see the specs on your processor. And for this, we're going to go down here, we're going to look right where it says Virtualization and make sure that that's enabled. If it's not enabled on your system, then you're going to need to go into your BIOS and enable virtualization. Every BIOS is different, so I would refer to your motherboard manufacturer's website or the manufacturer of your PC's website to find out how to enable virtualization. But once you get that enabled, the next step is to click on your Start button and type in Control Panel. Go ahead and open up Control Panel and click on Uninstall a Program. And from there, we want to click on Turn Windows Features On or Off. And from here, we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom until we see Windows Sandbox right here. We're going to give it a check and then hit OK, and it's going to take a second for Windows Sandbox to install. And then once it installs, then we're going to have to restart our computer real quick. And right here, we're going to go ahead and hit the restart button so we can move on to the next step. Now, while Windows restarts, let's talk about Windows Sandbox for a minute. Once this is installed, you have a very, very modest virtual machine available to you. This virtual machine shares all the CPU cores of your host system and gives you 4 gigabytes of RAM by default. However, you can change this by playing around with the settings a little bit. Let's jump back on the system and I'll show you how Windows Sandbox works and how you can modify the settings. Okay, so here we are in Windows 11 again. That took an awfully long time to start up. So we're going to click our Start button and we're going to search for Windows Sandbox right here and go ahead and give it a click. And it should fire up the Windows Sandbox. It's going to take a second and it looks like it's downloading and installing updates because I thought that's what we just did, but I guess we need to do it again. But we're going to give it a second. We're going to let it do its thing and then it's going to start up and give us, like you'll see, a completely separate Windows environment that we can use for testing purposes. So as you can see, it starts up fairly quickly and you have your own little Windows 11 virtual machine. Now this right here is actually a really slimmed down version of Windows. It doesn't have the Windows Store in it. It doesn't have a lot of programs installed. In fact, for people that like debloated installs of Windows, this is actually an extremely debloated install of Windows. But let me show you a couple things first. So first of all, as you can see, you're going to need ways to get files onto this computer. So let's, for the sake of argument, say that we have a file that we want to move over here. So here's our file, and if we want to move this file over into the sandbox, now you can't just drag and drop it, unfortunately. That would be nice if you could. But if you right-click and hit copy, you can come over here, right-click and hit paste, and you can do it that way. But as you can see, we can't even open text files. That's how slimmed down this virtual machine is it doesn't even have Notepad installed, which I find that actually kind of funny. But what you can also do is if you come over to these dots right here, you can click on share a folder. And what this does is it allows you to share one of your local computer folders with the sandbox itself. So I'm just going to share my desktop right here. We're going to hit select folder. And as you can see, our desktop comes up here. And if we open this, we can still see the same file text. Now you can make this read or write like I did. And if I deleted this, you'll see it disappears on the desktop too. So you can use that to be able to transfer files from and to the host machine to the virtual machine. So if you want to download like a real shifty executable that you downloaded off the internet, this is a great way to do it, because if it ends up being an infected file, then literally all you have to do is hit the little X button right here and hit OK, and it all goes away like it never existed before. And we're going to go ahead and fire that up again real quick. So I'm going to type in Windows Sandbox again. We're going to fire it up again. This time it doesn't have to check for updates, clearly, because it did that the last time. And when it fires up, you'll see that all the stuff that we had on our desktop from the last time is completely gone. Because every time you launch up Windows Sandbox, it launches up a fresh install. Okay, so from right here, I'm going to go ahead and right-click down on our taskbar here, and we're going to open up Task Manager. And from Task Manager, as you can see, this system right here only has 4 gigs of RAM allocated to it, even though the main system itself has 32 gigs of RAM. This only has 4 itself. However, the CPU, it is sharing all 12 virtual processors, or all 12 cores of my Ryzen 5 7600. And it also, if you click on your hard drive, it has a fairly modest 80 gigabyte hard drive that it can use. But it also has access to the Ethernet and your NVIDIA GPU. So if you wanted to, you could actually probably play some games in this thing. But unfortunately, we're gonna have to save that for another video. We're not gonna try that in this one. So what we're gonna wanna do now is I wanna show you how you can modify some of these settings right here. So for this, we're gonna go ahead and modify the memory settings right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this virtual machine right here. We're gonna go ahead and open up Microsoft's website that gives us all the instructions on how to do this. So from right here, it allows you to change a lot of the different aspects of the sandbox itself just simply by creating a configuration file. And to create that configuration file, it shows you right here. We can essentially do it right in Notepad. So I already have one that I've created, so I'm gonna go ahead and open that real quick. I'm gonna run here. I'm going to right click on here, and we're just gonna copy this over to our desktop real quick so we can play around with it here. All right, so if I right click on this thing, I hit show more options, and then I edit with Notepad. As you can see, this right here is essentially all you do is set up configuration and then close it with configuration. And in this one, all I did was change the memory to 16 gigabytes. But you can do a lot of different things in here. You can play around with the GPU. You can play around with networking, mapped folders. There's lots of different settings that you can do in here. And in fact, if you go up to the top right here, it shows you all the different things that you can manipulate about the VM through one of these files. And then essentially all you have to do is once you're finished, you go File, Save As, and then save this as a WSB file. And you can name it whatever you want. I named mine Sandbox WSB, but you can name yours whatever you want. And then once you save that file as a WSB, you can go ahead and close this. And then you can launch it simply by clicking on the configuration file, and it will launch a sandbox with the configuration with the configuration that you set inside the file itself. And to test that, we can go ahead and right click on our taskbar here, go to Task Manager, and you'll see if we go into our Performance tab, we now have 16 gigabytes of memory. But one of the things that's actually kind of neat about Windows Sandbox that I liked is if we open up my Task Manager, click on my Performance tab, you'll see that I'm actually not using 16 gigs of memory, even though 16 has been allocated to the virtual machine. Now, most virtual machine programs will kind of hold that memory so that it'll be used for the virtual machine. But in this case, what Windows Sandbox does is it kind of dynamically allocates that memory. So it only uses it if it needs it, and if it doesn't, it leaves it available to the host system. So you have the memory essentially shared between the host and the virtual machine. So now that you have Windows Sandbox set up, you can pretty much use and abuse this thing as much as you want, and you don't have to worry about hurting your host operating system. So if you've ever downloaded a shifty file and you want to make sure it's not infected with something, just copy it over to the Windows Sandbox and launch it with no worries. If it turns out to be something bad, then just close the sandbox and it's gone. But the problem is, if you're running Windows Home, you unfortunately don't have this available to you. I mean, there are workarounds in order to get this to function within Windows Home, but today I'm going to show you an alternative that people on both Home and Pro can use that's a little bit more powerful than this. In fact, it's actually a lot more powerful than this. So let's jump back on the system and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we can go ahead and close all this right here. We're not going to need it now. And the program that I want to show you about today is this program right here. This is called VirtualBox. This is a free program that you can use to virtualize any operating system you want. It doesn't have to be the Windows 11 like we're doing today with Windows Sandbox. It could be anything. It can be Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 98, Windows 3.1. I've literally installed Windows 3.1 in VirtualBox and it works. Kind of. It's actually kind of hard to install. Definitely for another video for sure. But it doesn't even have to be Windows. It could even be a Linux distribution or even Mac OS X. I haven't tried to install OS X in VirtualBox, but I'm willing to bet someone has figured out how to do it and written a how-to online. So if you want to try it out, go ahead and Google it, and I bet you'll find something. So to download this, all you do is go over to VirtualBox's website, download the host platform for whatever operating system you have. Obviously, we have a Windows host, so we download it from here. But if you're running any other operating system, you can download the host for those operating systems individually. Now, while you're here, you also want to make sure to download the VirtualBox extension pack. Now, the reason why these are separated is because VirtualBox itself is open source, but the extension pack is not. Now, they're both free. You can download them and use them both free, but unfortunately, the extension pack is not open source, so you have to download that one manually. And I think it's because a lot of there's some proprietary code that's within that allows you to operate USB 3.0 and things of that nature. But anyway, I would download this one here as well as this one here in order to get it to work, and then install both. And once you're left with, you should have a copy of VirtualBox. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set up a virtualized operating system from within VirtualBox. And unfortunately, it's not quite as easy as it was with Windows Sandbox, but like I said, it's a lot more powerful too. So the first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need a copy of Windows 11. Now, from Windows 11, you can always Google this, or I'll try to put a link down in the description below, but unfortunately, I kind of forget to do that sometimes. So if I forget, just go ahead and remind me in the comments and I'll get right on it. But once you get to this website, you go down to the bottom and you download an actual ISO image for Windows 11. And once you have that, I already have one downloaded. So you just go to VirtualBox, click on the new button right here, and we're going to go ahead and create a new virtual machine. So I'm going to call this one Windows 11. And then for the ISO image, this should be the ISO image that you just downloaded. So for me, I'm going to click this one right here that I already have in my downloads folder. And you should have one in your downloads folder as well. Now, I recommend not using the unattended installation because you can kind of go through and you can install it manually like you normally would. However, if you do use the unattended installation, it bypasses the Microsoft account requirements without requiring you to do so. However, if you don't do that, which I'm not going to do on this one, you can use the same workaround that we use by shifting Shift F10 to get the command prompt. You know the one. You can use that one if you want in order to bypass the Microsoft account requirements. Now from this right here, obviously we're doing Microsoft Windows. And then if you go through all these settings right here, you can actually set up the hardware and the different things that you want to do. Like for the unattended install, you can automatically create a local user account if you want. You can even install the product key that you want to use for this install. And keep in mind, this is going to be a separate install of Windows. So unfortunately, you're going to need a separate license for this than you have on your main host operating system. But it's going to be worth it. Let me show you why. So the next one, we're going to click on the virtual hardware, and this is going to be your memory and the number of CPUs that you're going to be using on the system. Now for this one right here, 4 gigabytes is not enough memory. So I'm going to pull this thing up. We're going to go ahead and go all the way up to 16 gigs. And then for number of CPUs, well, I have 12 virtual cores available, but I only have 6 real cores available. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch this thing up to 4. And by putting it at 4, it will allow VirtualBox to use 4 of my logical cores on my system that I have here. And then from here, obviously, we need to use EFI because this is Windows 11. And then if we click on Specify Virtual Hard Drive, here's where you can kind of change whatever different specs you want. Like if you need more than 80 gigs, you can change it right here. And then once you're done, you can go ahead and hit Finish, and that'll create the virtual machine for you. And then to set it up, all you got to do is hit the Start button, and it'll launch the virtual machine. And then once this launches, with Windows 11, there's one thing that you have to do. When it says right here to click any key to launch from the CD, you actually have to click any key, or it's going to make a liar out of me, and it's not going to. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so it just took a second. So you have to click any key. If you don't, then it will fail to boot from the CD-ROM, and it'll just get stuck. But if you do click it, then it'll go ahead and launch from the ISO file, and it'll go into the regular install as if you were installing any other copy of Windows on bare hardware. And it's going to take a second to get into the installer, and then we can go ahead and install Windows. And from here, you just install Windows as if you were to install it on any other system. However, I'm not going to put you through that. I'm going to go ahead and install Windows real quick, and I'll meet you back here when it's done. Okay, here we are in Windows 11 through VirtualBox. Now, this one right here, just like the last one, can be used as a testing environment to be able to do whatever testing that you want to do, but on a system that isn't your main host system. However, by using VirtualBox, you have more power to be able to control what kind of hardware that you want to use on that. So if you want more or less memory, more or less cores, you can always do that from within here. And then you can also run different operating systems, like I said. And the other benefit to this right here is that unlike Windows Sandbox, which isn't a persistent operating system, meaning that it's volatile, whenever you turn it off, everything that's on it you lose, VirtualBox is persistent. So whatever you do, whatever you change from within VirtualBox, it will change, or it will save those changes the next time you launch it, just like any other normal system would. However, there are things that we could do to make it a little less persistent if we wanted to use it in a situation to where it could possibly have problems like testing viruses and things of that nature. So let me show you how to do that. So the first thing you're going to need to do is go ahead and shut down the virtual machine, and I'm going to show you how to take a snapshot. It's going to take a second for this to shut down. Shouldn't take too long, but once it gets shut down, I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so from here, all you got to do is go ahead and click on the next tab over where it says snapshots. And then right now, this is the current state of the system. So if we right click and we hit take a snapshot, and we can name this whatever we want, like testing, if I can spell it right, scary file. And then there, now you have a snapshot that says this is the current state after testing scary file. So from that point, we can go ahead and fire it up, and I'll go ahead and show you how this functions. Unfortunately, it's nowhere near as streamlined as Windows Sandbox is. That's why I think Windows Sandbox is still a really important tool, because it's, well, for one thing, it's a lot faster and it's a lot easier because you don't have to deal with the snapshots. However, VirtualBox is nice in how it is able to maintain a persistent operating system for a situation to where if you want to do any kind of testing or just have a VirtualBox for running a different version of Windows or a different operating system altogether from within Windows. So it's a lot more versatile. You can do a lot more stuff with VirtualBox than you can with Windows Sandbox. However, it does kind of both of them have their own benefits and their own downsides as well. So this thing is almost booted up, and I can kind of show you how the snapshot system works. So it's going to take one more second for this thing to boot up. Okay, so now as we're here, so no matter what you do to this thing, it's now going to be in the current snapshot. So if we right click here, I'm just going to right click and create a file. So we're going to go ahead and hit new, text document, and we'll just call it this file. Now, if we go ahead and close this now, I'm just going to power off the machine so we don't have to go through the whole shutdown process. You'll see that the current state has changed from the last snapshot. And that's because we just changed it. However, if you go over to the last snapshot, right click and hit restore, it'll ask you if you want to create another snapshot to save the version of Windows that you currently have. You don't have to do that. If you want to revert back to the old snapshot, you can uncheck this and then just hit restore, and it restores fairly quickly. So now when we start it back up, you'll see that that text document that I just created is no longer on the desktop because we've kind of brought the operating system back in time using the snapshot system. But instead of making you go through the boot up process again, I'm just going to skip ahead until Windows is booted up, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we are. Our virtual machine is booted back up, and as you can see, the text document we created is completely gone. So unfortunately, Windows Home users are going to have to use VirtualBox unless you want to go through the process of enabling the Windows Sandbox in Windows Home Edition. Personally though, I think that VirtualBox is a much more useful tool as far as it's being more configurable. It allows you to have multiple VMs with different operating systems, even non-Windows operating systems. If you want to play around with something else other than Windows, the VM created in VirtualBox it kind of functions like a regular system. It stores your data and settings across reboots, unlike Windows Sandbox, and also supports snapshots so you can do whatever testing that you want to do, and it doesn't work out, you can always restore back to the old snapshot. I use VirtualBox quite often in videos because it makes it easier to revert back to a point while doing demonstrations. Whenever I do a video on something, I've already done that thing to make sure that it'll actually work before I film the video. Once I do it, I can always revert the snapshot back to before it was done so I can do it again for the video. However, with that said, the Windows Sandbox is still a really useful tool. If you just want a quick and dirty VM to test out something and you're not concerned with that VM remaining the way you left it, then the Windows Sandbox is definitely a good choice. In fact, I think you should have both of them installed because they're both good for their own purposes. But with that said, a virtual machine is a great way to test things you don't want to test on your system. You know that in case something really bad happens, you can always revert back. So now that you know how to set up a virtual machine, check out this playlist to many different ways you could customize Windows. Try them out in the VM first, and if you like them, then you can try them on your main system. But as always, you guys have a great day.